Welcome everybody. This is fantastic. We have a great turnout today. Almost 200 people have signed up for this, so this is wonderful. I want to thank both our speakers today, Antony and Tomás. I know how busy they are, and it's been almost a year that we've been trying to plan. Everybody's so busy, so this is more special than you can even imagine. I think almost all of you know Antony and Tomás, but I'll just give you a quick little brief introduction. I don't want to take the time up from their conversation. Antony Gormley is a UK-based artist. He's widely acclaimed for his sculptures, installations, and public artworks, which investigate the relationship of the human body to space. And Gormley continually tries to identify the space of art as a place of becoming in which new behaviors, thoughts, and feelings can arise. And to join the conversation and take that a little further, we have Tomás Saraceno, is an Argentinian-born, Berlin-based artist whose projects dialect with forms of life and life-forming, rethinking dominant threads of knowledge in the Capitalocene era and recognizing how diverse modes of being engage a multiplicity of vibrations on the web of life. So with that, I think we'll just hand it over to Antony and Tomás.
Well, Tomás, thank you so much for agreeing to do this. I know it's taken a long time to organize, but I'm just so happy to meet you again, even in virtual space. But I was really delighted, Letitia, by what you said. The sculpture, the family of ISC is, and I love the idea that actually, you know, this community of makers in a way supports and connects with itself through this network. And I'm really happy to be with you today. Anyway, I just thought that we should start off with a really big question, like, what is sculpture good for? And I wanted to ask Tomás what his idea that sculpture could be good for.
No, thank you, Antony. Thank you, everybody. It's an honor, a pleasure. I've been following your work, and when you asked, it was a beautiful. We met one time at the Serpent, I think so, physically, long time ago, and I think it resonates many of the ideas and things, and since then I think so we met a couple of times in some openings, and I was so thrilled that to follow this invitation in relation with sculptures and think and speculate together the different possibilities that we are having. What is sculpture? Something that, you know, through kind of a tiny conversation we have had the other day that for me kind of touched me a lot, and I will be curious to ask you, not to reply, but is the state of a mind sometimes that you had brain practices in the past with the meditation. That's something which for me have let me also think a lot about the possibility of being and to think about sculpture in that relationship, right? I don't know, I'm just only thinking like sculptures as also something that it could go beyond the visual, right? We have been thinking also how much the embodiment of our presence, let's say as human, but also maybe as other presence in the world, and how much you know, I've been practiced for a bit, for some years already, transcendental meditation. And then I've been thinking all the time how my own practice on sculpture, but also your synergy, because you have said you spent quite a bit of time in India with Vipassana and all that thing. Does it mean I'm kind of trying to weave that within the thinking of the conversation we're having today, but maybe...
Yeah, no, that's lovely. What a lovely, generous opening. I mean, I think broadly speaking that sculpture is still and silent. It's a material proposition that hopefully invites a kind of conversation with any viewer coming across it, but more than a conversation, because it's embodied. I mean, that's the beautiful thing about sculpture. It's not a picture of the world, it's in the world. It's not, as it were, an observation about the world, it's acting in and on the world. And I guess that, for me anyway, you have to somehow use its stillness and its silence as a catalyst for life. I mean, because art comes out of life and hopefully goes back into life. And in relation to vipassana and meditation, I mean, for me, that was a door into a new way of thinking and feeling that had nothing to do with knowledge and everything to do with experience. And it recognized that, in a sense, we are consciousnesses embedded in matter, and actually our bodies are a whole autonomous universe of processes that happen without our conscious participation autonomically, but we can observe that. And I think, for me, that experience of closing your eyes, being still and silent in meditation, and observing what happens, observing change, but within your psychophysical kind of makeup, that was an incredible lesson for me, and maybe more important than any other things I learned at art school or you know, at school, any kind of school, because this wasn't a school. It was sitting down and saying, what's here? And I think that, in a funny way, you know, this then kind of bled into the sculpture. Here is this still silent object in the world that, in a way, kind of confronts you. And it lacks everything that you have. It doesn't have movement. It doesn't have thought. It doesn't have feeling. It doesn't have, in a way, all of these attributes that we think of as being so important for the attributes of freedom, of choice. Mm-hmm. But it gives us a place in which we can project all those thoughts and feelings. And that's what it's magic. It's a kind of inert catalyst that allows us to feel our aliveness, because it's in a different kind of strata, different bandwidth of time.
No, I remember how beautiful, because for the ones who might don't know, but Vipassana, I mean, there are different type of meditation. I started with a transcendental meditation, which is one type of meditation that there is a kind of a way of entering in a kind of a state of mind, a state of breathing, a certain rhythm of kind of presence. They always said, like, also through meditation, there are different level of awareness, no? And it seems something which I don't know is true. I really need to check it. But, you know, when you sleep, you consume a certain amount of air. You breathe in, you breathe out, and then you have a certain turnover and the temperature of your body and how much you inhale and exhale. Now, it seems that the state of your mind, body, or embodied consciousness, the time that you consume less amount of oxygen is during meditation. And this means you are not sleeping, right? Because you think, oh, well, maybe when I'm very quiet, let's say when you are in this dormant state, in kind of these, you know, latencies of presence, that you're all the time challenging yourself about what it might be there, what might not be there. But it seems in this meditation state is really like the lowest stage of at least consuming air. Now, and I think so, something which I like, Antony, when we started to talk the other day, you know, the Vipassana, and I've been, I think so 2 years ago, the first is kind of a moment that you have to be for 10 days in completely silent, right? You are not allowed to talk with anybody. You are with a group of people. I was almost with 50, 60 people. You're not allowed to read anything. You cannot write anything. And you are in completely silent for 10 days. No mobile phone, of course, no nothing. And then the first 2 days is only concentrating how much your earth, you try to feel how the air come through your nose and touch your lips, and then it's almost like I got really kind of, it was an exercise of really being able of start to perceive the things in a completely different manner. And I think so, through a tiny conversation we have, Antony, is like how much, sometimes culture, the practice we do, it allows ourselves, and I think so the question we have been posing is sometimes, the rhythms of traveling, making, and sometimes Corona somehow have allowed to few people who have the chance and the possibility to slow down, somehow it came back sometimes again to a certain rhythms that it seems it contrasts for sometimes what the mind, the body, or let's say the spiders in their embodied cognition. No, I'm always thinking about that's very difficult for the spiders who weave webs, how much these extended bodies, in the way that science have been categorizing. It's the split. No, it's kind of the same how we think ourselves in relationship with our embodied cognition. But yes, I think so. That's something which have really touched me, Antony. And then
But it is amazing the way that you talk about spiders and their embodied consciousness, and the fact that actually you can't divide the spider from the web. The spider and the web are one thing. And this idea that the web is both a receiver, but also in a way, transmitter of this vitality of the spider. And the interesting thing for me in Vipassana, so what Thomas was just talking about was the three, in a SN Goenka Vipassana kind of classic course, you do 3 days of Anapana, which is awareness of breathing. And it's so beautiful because the breathing is an autonomic kind of system. We don't need to control it. But the interesting thing is, as the body becomes quieter and quieter, so your breathing and need for oxygen becomes less and less, and you breathe less and less. But so your concentration has to increase. And this is the preamble to then going into a 7 days of Vipassana, where you become aware of Vedana in Pali, which means feelings, which means like, but it's really extraordinary because yes, you have to isolate this bij, this kind of point of concentration, which you've activated by looking at the breath coming in and out of the body. You might say, what has all of this got to do with sculpture? Well, I think that the fact is that you use that point of concentration then to sweep through the body and liberate it, because we are so obsessed, and art has for so many cultures been about, well, certainly Western or Occidental culture, maybe we can say, about appearances and about reproducing appearances. But through this experience of seeing the body from the inside, you realize that actually the skin doesn't matter. The thing that light falls on doesn't matter. It is something else. We are embedded in a place. Let's try it. You close your eyes, and now you're asked that question. Let's just do it as a mind experiment. Close your eyes. Now, where are we? We are in a place. The experience of it is special. But tell me about that space. It's dark. There are no edges to it. It is without objects. It hasn't got any dimension. So this is incredible to me. We are in a space that is infinite. So anyway, the point is that by denying the skin, we become a bit like a spider. In other words, we suddenly are part of a system of infinite extension. And I think that Thomas's work kind of gives us these membranes where we naturally feel that. We can feel the vibration of these.
It's not mind work, it's spider work. One thing.
No, but you learned from the spiders, and the spiders have allowed you to copy their technology or something. Anyway.
But one thing also which is nice, Antony, and I think so, is because sometimes and also in the case of I think so more emphatic is in the transcendental meditation that and the vipassana. But nevertheless, is the group meditation. That is very, very different when you meditate alone in your home and when you meditate in a room with other people. And that you sometimes think might not have an effect, but I think so. There is kind of a synergy, energy. There is something which is truly magical, at least for me, and have been very, very different to these practices. And I think so. Sometimes when we think about also sculptures, or when we think about the relationship between how we can kind of weave these webs of interaction, these webs of synergies, I think so. It's all the time, sometimes we are so classical dividing, we produce, and then there's a consumer and the art and the viewer, and I think so it's kind of really nice to try to think about this, this connection that sometimes are not so evident, but really try to vibrate, or to kind of tune within this unperceivable world. And in that extent, another, thing which sometimes we forget, because it's always about, sometimes, a certain culture that we inherit, and somehow we project always from one point of view and from one kind of monoculture, Western, white, patriarchal, dominant view. Something which I learned a lot is with the spider diviners in Cameroon, which is a small village in Sommier, that organized the wisdom and the knowledge of the spider, and many of the decisions that the village takes is with the knowledge of spiders. In this case, a spider who live under the ground. There's a spider diviner, a kind of shaman who is able to communicate with the spider, and this means somebody in the village have a trouble, or the village itself has some question, and the diviner goes to the spiders. It communicate through some vibration on the top of a pen. There is a set of cards which are placed at the top where the spider might come up or not, and then maybe it take one day, maybe a couple of hours. Sometimes it come out the spider very soon, and the spider come out, move the cards in a certain way, and then there is an interpretation of how these cards have been placed on the ground, and based on that, the diviner interpret that, and then there is a kind of an answer. Now, if a spider, for example, answers several times that somebody is guilty of something, let's say if you commit a crime or have stole something, if 7 spiders consecutively say that you are guilty, you can go to jail. I mean, what I'm thinking about in Western society sometimes, with an extinction of the species, with a climate change, with a non-recognition of certain interweave relationship that some humans still have with certain animals, how much we have to kind of give the rights of nature and give very complicated system, while still there are some recognitions from the knowledge from non-human being, in this case invertebrates, and how much this somehow it's so much in danger today within the world. Has been in that case, let's say the sculpture, just a little bit to give the frame. When I went to that place, I said like, okay, I was not so comfortable of kind of a National Geographic approach of saying, well, I want to film, and then you end up exhibiting this work in galleries, and then somehow the retribution of their knowledge is not really kind of in balance of how much we have kind of related with that knowledge. And in this case was clear from day one, because when I met the divine, I said, I want that you make a web page for me. I want to offer the spider divination to the rest of the world. And this was very clear, the terms and conditions, sometimes, the privacy, or what would this approach. And this I start to film everything as a kind of a platform which exists today, is a Nangdu divination platform with IP belonging to the village. And then, was more a kind of, the sculpture is kind of a service provided for that relationship to be offered to the world, and every divination, it goes directly retributing their knowledge and to maintain that tradition, that culture. I mean,
he must be very busy now, Tomás.
Well, we together with the village, with the chief of the village, the fee is quite high, because the process of questioning, it takes a lot of time. Despite sometimes it takes maybe a week, 2 weeks until decide. And then the question, sometimes the answers are not so clear. This is quite of a time. This some questions take quite a bit of a time, but I found
tell me, Thomas, is it possible for sculpture itself to be diagnostic? I mean, in a way, what you're suggesting is that we admit to the distributed intelligence of other life forms, and that we actually, you know, it's a good idea to as it were, consult other systems in order to unpick our own kind of knots. But I guess I'm trying to bring this back to what sculpture is good for. I think you've talked now about how we can maybe through knowledges that we have ignored, perhaps, root ourselves into living systems. But I think we're living, I mean, my point is that we're living systems already. And what moved me very much about, you know, your shed installation, for example, was the fact that you allowed us to move in space, somewhat in the manner of a spider, but you made these membranes that allowed us to participate in a kind of mutable field where the viewer becomes the viewed for other viewers, and we begin to see ourselves, in a way, our creatureliness, the fact that humans are animals, that in a way, everything we're doing now, you know, we're all sort of stationary and stuck to a screen. You know, this activity denies, but you're giving, as it were, a new opportunity for behavior within the frame of art, where it's nothing to do with this sacred object that kind of has encapsulated a moment of personal truth that you want to be now universal. You've actually created a situation. This isn't an object, this is a place. This isn't actually just a place. It is the medium by which experience is shared, and an experience of a very direct physical kind. And I think that, you know, that's the tension that I find myself with in my work, that on the one hand, I believe utterly in sculpture's ability, in a way, to be a still thing in a ever-changing world, and through which can act as a, in a way, a mean or a kind of marker in time and space. But the other side of sculpture is actually, no, it can simply be, you know, like music, an architecture in space that allows us, like the spider, to feel extended.
No, absolutely. And then this is why I like a lot you know what I mean. Sometimes many spiders weave webs. You can you know, make an assumption. They're very poor in vision, in sight. You know, for a visual artist will be very bad, but they are able to perceive space through this reverberation that extend their body through this web, right? And I mean, and I think so. You know, bats, they do with echolocation, right? We can clap, and then sometimes we understand how big the room is in relationship, how much waves go back and forth within the room. This means, you know, the state of mind as an architectural possibility, you know, entering in this kind of different modes of alpha, beta, or whatever state.
All the rhythms.
Yeah. It gives you the possibility sometimes also to scale the complexity of the ability to be within the space, you know, and to be present. And sometimes we kind of, you know, because I think so, Antony, you know, you have been working also on this amazing architectural scale. I study architecture also in the past. This, I mean, there are these all the time entangled, but sometimes, as you said, you close your eyes and the space is gigantic, you know what I mean? And take you only like one very simple action, no? And you can decide to enter the space with closed eyes or open eyes, right? I mean, sometimes it's, we realize, I feel myself at least, talking, through a way of kind of perceiving or understanding the space, kind of sometimes too solidified, you know what I mean? And suddenly, but when you enter from another angle, you can experience a museum with closed eyes. And what will be that experience? You know what I mean? How things, when you really kind of embody the Umwelt of the spiders, that is really kind of a completely different perception of the world, and how much this perception of the world kind of collides sometimes, and sometimes because you don't feel, you don't perceive, sometimes spiders are able to produce vibration which are below the human range of perception, or we use up 20 hertz is what we can hear, or a young person can hear, I think some 50, 60, but spiders perceive up to 6 hertz, very, very low frequency. And this means, for example, when you mentioned the shed, or I mean, your beautiful installation, Antony, a Documenta, where you have made this amazing platform where everybody was able to participate about that. I think so. For me, the tension again is about, sometimes being alone in space or being together with other space. And this idea is all the time to generate this social web of a possible catalyst of change, And that's, sometimes all the time I'm kind of trying to think of how really actively we are dealing with the climate emergency that we are all dealing. I feel the urge from art being a place all the time of really a comfortable place of not, of saying, well, we deal with much more long-term relationship. It's like, how much sometimes I feel the urge of saying, almost going to the activist side, you know what I mean?
But I think I think that's the only way to go. We don't have very long. If we don't change our lives will be lost. I mean, and not just ours, but much of the biosphere with us. So that urgency of finding, in a way, I mean, I think what you were talking about was the distinction between, if you like, architecture or the creation of space and the creation of objects. But I think that the best things that I know are both. So, I was talking to you in our last conversation about the ring of Brodgar or Stonehenge. I mean, here is a sculptural expression of architecture that has none of the wishes to enclose or shelter or provide facilities, but everything about connecting us to a wider reality. And I still think that's what we need. I mean, our ancestors made, images and sculptures of animals because they believed that they had, in a way, the vitality that we lacked. They had the society that we lacked. When there were only like 50,000 sapiens in Europe, we were looking at those herds of aurochs or deer or wild horses and thinking, my God, they have the collective mind that we don't. We're just hanging on here. There were so few of us, and we depended. We loved those animals, but we had to take their skins. We had to eat their flesh in order to survive. But this was the beginning of art. This idea that we are part of a wider system. We have to discover our own animal nature by in a way celebrating the animals that we live in the world with. And I feel that we are at a stage now where that connection between art and survival is even more important, even though we now have, as it were, all the comforts of shelter and support.
No, one thing that it kind of, I thought the other day when we finished the talk, one of the things that I kind of dropped architecture when I was in contact with the book of Bernard Rudolski. He published a book and then he made an exhibition, a photographer at MoMA 70s, I think so. And the title was Architecture Without Architects. Yeah. And I was thinking,
that was a beautiful book.
Beautiful. And then what about if we think art without artists? Because the samples that you have mentioned, Anthony, the Stonehenge, do you know the single artists who have made that? No. The cave painting, you know. And I think so we will run into extinction if we keep perpetuating the uniqueness and the genius of the singularity of, in this case, maybe one single species as humans, still at the top of the pyramid, and also the uniqueness as a discipline also by itself. I mean, and the conversation we have had the other day, I think so was the intention also. And I'm so pleased because sometimes between artists, we don't talk so much, and it's more, we have too much ego somehow to share our own world. And then sometimes also it's the society is driving us to a state of mind, to a state of presence that it seems like we're single individual geniuses. And maybe the world is selling like, look, in the really long term, in the samples you give, Anthony, nobody will be reminded of that sculptures, because the one who stays, maybe they have been done really with a different model, with a different web of interrelationship between humans themselves, humans and animals. And there are still alive that things. Let's not neglect. There are still a lot of out cultures and community which are really, you know, when you talk about the diviners, you know, is the spider more important who have the oracle, is the shaman who interpreted, is the whole community who respect that relation. You know, is again, there is no one single thread that you can pull out of this web, right?
No, but I can't agree more. I mean, we're still running on a, you know, in a way, a very Western and yeah, kind of the artist as the singular kind of example of the free individual, capable of making their own work in their own space, in their own time, which then becomes an icon of, in a way, kind of human potential. But it's such a dangerous model. Because I think, you know, I know that I am able to work now better than ever before because I work with a group of creative people. You know, I know that I'm always better when somebody has a better idea than mine, and we somehow kind of connect. And anyway, I think the things that I am most proud of in terms of my work are those things that have come out of collaboration, have come out of some going to a place and saying, well, what can we do together? You know, this is an amazing place, this is a particular, but how can we make something that makes the particularity of this place even more particular? So that idea that you start with the ground up and you don't start with kind of, I don't know, trying to transport an object that's been immaculately conceived and immaculately made in this kind of spaceship of an artist's studio, but that you say, what does the air smell like here? What's under the ground? What can we do to root it in this place? And the first thing you have to do is find the community that lives in that place, and then talk to them, and then see what skills they have, what materials they have a relationship with. And anyway, so it's a very different model, and it does come from the colonized, not the colonizers. You know, we all live in a late capitalist exploitative mining, you know, kind of mindset, which is like, oh, there's resources there, let's isolate them and then sell them as a commodity. Well, you know, I mean, Joseph Beuys said it all. You know, the greatest commodity that we have is human creativity, and it cannot be isolated, because I mean, what we're doing now, this is a form of the emergence of art. We're having a conversation. I'm sorry you are all silent at the moment, but I'm looking forward to the point where we can have a really wide conversation. But you know, I'm sharing with Thomas kind of, in a way, a model of my experience, and saying, you know, and he's doing the same, and together we're kind of, we're making some kind of web that might or might not have meaning, but anyway, it's a kind of live thing. And somehow, you know, art has been institutionalized and commodified, and those two things have frozen it into something that denies the fact that actually art is about experience, and art is about kind of becoming. And it isn't, you know, the only excuse for the objects is that they catalyze that sense of exchange. Sorry, I was getting on my high horse there.
No, but it's amazing. But I like, Anthony, also what you said. Let's see, as I think so. Yeah, it will be wonderful to hear question, answers, and then try to expand the conversation.
Yeah, has anybody got? Yeah, come on, let's open this up. That would be good.
It would be wonderful.
Sure, and everyone, you're obviously muted right now, but you can put things in the chat for me to read out loud. That might be the best way, but certainly you can unmute. There is something from earlier in the chat that maybe you'd both like to address from Glenn, who is in Florida. He asked, how do you both think about death and suicide? Both of you have created works that threaten death.
Wow. That threatened death, or was it threatened death?
It was, but Glenn, if you're here and you want to unmute to elaborate or specify your question, you can certainly do so.
But yeah, I think that this is Event Horizon that I showed in various cities around the world. And I mean, this is 27 body forms that are all based on my body. Not that it's special, but it's an example of human embodiment. And it's the one that I find most convenient to use. But I put 27 on the skyline between the yeah, all in cities. So the horizon that you don't see, the sculptures by implication have a connection to, and then 4 on the ground. And yeah, I remember very well the New York Post that, you know, it was a big headline, just said jump, and it was like, this is ridiculous, you know, some brain kind of dead artist just thinks that it's a good idea after 9/11 to put these images of jumpers, you know, on our skyline. And I feel exactly the opposite. This is, I think that we do have as humans a perception very, very quickly to be able to tell what is a living body and what is a dead one, or anyway a sculpture. But what they did is they made us aware of human scale in New York in relation to, you know, these massive high-rise, this incredible social experiment that is, you know, New York, Manhattan. What an amazing long-term experiment in collective living that is. But anyway, the idea really was for you to be aware of that made landscape. And yes, it was maybe it naturally reminded one of people who've decided that life's too tough. But that wasn't that the purpose of it was completely the opposite.
Yeah, it's a difficult question. I'm sometimes with some of the installation, I think so. Yeah, you sometimes I try to frame it more as about like confronting sometimes fears, you know, and it comes from acrophobia, fear of heights, and sometimes arachnophobias, fears of other creatures that many cultures suffer, but not all. And this means is sometimes how you deal internally, you know, as this kind of overimposed, because there is not really much sense of we should be really afraid about cars, about cows, about anything else, but not about spiders, because they're really, it kills nobody, right? But from where it comes, right? When it comes, that relationship that at the end, people are really get paralyzed. And then just from another angle, I'm just speculating, because spiders, they play a behavior of playing death also to save themselves from others who want to eat them. It's called thanatismo or something like this. It's not tarantula or tarantella, thanatismo, I think so. And this means, let's say that a bird want to come and eat the spider. The spider, what it does, it kind of drop dead. It's kind of, because the animal, if the spider do not move, will not like to eat a dead body. And it's kind of a strategy to survivance. this kind of play that now I don't know how it might come, but mostly what I think what I like a lot is what emerged then in these cultures sometimes, I don't know, in Hungary, Bikoka, or in Dusseldorf, that you enter this culture, you confront sometimes with your own fear. Many people suffer of high, and then you look around, and the best what you get is you get somebody else who might be a little bit more afraid or less afraid. And what it happened again, very, very kind of intuitively, people start to help each other. It's kind of, you give a hand to the other person, right? And then you say, okay, come on, it's okay, you know what I mean? Or because, are these very unstable surfaces that when you move in one place, the other person in the other side, it really move also. Does it mean it's kind of, you start to make eye contact, you slow down your footstep, you let the other person come, you offer your hand, and what best that this culture offer that, you know what I mean? Solidarity among them to kind of experience something that you are a little bit afraid, or how much you can trust art, because this structure are made by an artist, which is not really an engineer, pure proof architect. That's what does it mean? It kind of, it evidences a lot of sometimes intrinsic things that is part of that solidarity through this moment of confrontational. But at the end, the way of overcoming is through this solidarity with the other people which are in the work, which is I'm kind of very passionate.
But I love that story, and I love that idea that in some way, through these structures, something about collective mind and collective experience, and yes, solidarity and altruism naturally comes. All of those ways in which flocks and herds and shoals know collectively about danger and are learning from each other and doing this kind of psychogeography the whole time, like really, really alert. And I guess my horizon field Hamburg was just this big kind of flying carpet. But it was just a membrane. And what was amazing is that membrane, which was only 3 or 4 millimeters thick, but it was like a mirror. People would lie on it, but they would also do somersaults. They would walk on their hands. They would play. There was something about being out of the world while still being in it. And looking out from we removed the windows around the Deichtorhallen so they could look out at the city that they'd come from and see it from a different point of view. But all of these activities were transmitted through the membrane of this 3 millimeters of very, very black, shiny surface. And it was extraordinary how I think there was a lot of allowing. There was a lot of looking at this group of 100 people at a time could go onto this platform, and they became, in a way, this it was life kind of observing itself in all its variety. So children and adults and people who wanted to meditate, some people who wanted to see where their flat was over the other side of the city, and all of these different activities suddenly had a place that was, in a way, that was adequately disconnected, but then put them into a new connection. And this is what I feel sympathy for Tomás's work, because I think that's exactly what many of this, in a way, collective experiences that his work generates.
No, it's beautiful. I don't know if should we reply or we get another question?
Let's have another question.
Yeah. Okay, and I just want to say there's a lot of great questions in there, so I do apologize if we don't get to everyone's, but this one is from, I believe, Melanie. They are asking, can you speak to the idea of permanence or non-permanence in your work? Example, bronze sculptures, which may be discovered as physical objects by future generations versus temporal experiences that live only inside the memory of those who experienced it.
Well, you've described the whole range, haven't you? I mean, sculpture is not just in space, it's also in time. And I think we have to acknowledge that time is a very complicated concept and is all relative. So there is no absolute time, as Carlo Rovelli has so beautifully taught us all. And from my point of view, I think that we have to acknowledge and use this full spectrum of in a way temporal interval. And I am interested in my work meeting people who are not yet born, in meeting life forms that haven't yet evolved. But I'm also very, very interested in as it were, present time, first-hand experience. And I think, some of my work lasts a long time. Some, is entirely contingent on a lot of, equipment that, then gets dispersed.
No, beautiful. I think so. Part of, is time, space, and this collectivity that we are, I think, so trying to weave within, that it seems if the dream is shared, and sometimes dreams, it seems very personal, and it's very hard to enter into the dream of somebody else. I mean, it seems that each of us have our own dreams, but still the future is univocous. We are not used much to say futures in plural with an S at the end as a plurality of possibilities, and yet we struggle so much of dream together, right? I think so within these, sometimes we kind of try to become, to transcend ourselves through the materiality of things, no? And we know that, there are, again, with the architecture, with our architects, history of architecture it seems to be remembered or to be kind of perpetuated through history. It should be set in stone. It should be something that it lasts long. While, we get to know that, except certain exception as Stonehenge and maybe other commemorial things, the pyramids and many other things which are still are memories of really civilization, which it seems have not been really attuned to the web of life. And it seems that the architecture which are more built with clay, with mud, with things are the history from which seems are less permanent, but at the same time, for my side, are the more urgent, because are the one which seems are the one who understand also other co-evolution within that thing. It's all the time this struggle for me also, sometimes a collector asks, oh, how long is last the spider web? You know what I mean? Because you want to collect, you don't want that kind of a fade in a couple of years. I mean, beside that, the spider web, you can find in your own home. You know what I mean? I like kind of provoke a little bit this idea that, when people see in the museum a spider web, then they call me and say, I found a spider web in my house. Is this an artwork? And I say, of course, you find an artist in your own home, And then we kind of diverge this idea, who is an artist, who is doing art, who have the authorship, who have and how long you can maintain and keep that relationship. And then people start to ask, oh my God, these have a real value. Can you give me a certificate, right? It's like almost now asking, what is the NFT doing? How much we have to encrypt our own, memory, confronting with other ancestral memory. And then it unfolds all these kind of ridiculous things about owning and feeding, and say, oh, should I feed the spider? And then when you start to feed, you try to domesticate things, and then in the zoo they say, don't feed animals, because in the moment that you try to care, actually you fuck up more the relationship. It kind of unfold. The whole thing is how much I'm not used to, be with and let it be and let allow to be in the home, but through a relationship of mutual respect, and each we share that space. But the caring sometimes we're applying to others is not exactly the caring that maybe spider wanted. You know what I mean? They have been on the planet for 280 million years. Humans only 300,000. When people say, oh, I work with a spider, let's be a bit more humble. I think so spider work with me, right? A species to live in a place have to live minimum 5 million years. Human, even at this, let's say, stage of evolution, if we believe, is that only 300,000 years. Spider 300 million years. I mean, we have a long way still to go and a long way to learn from our little creature. We are so afraid still.
And can I ask you, Thomas, do spiders have attachment to their webs? I mean, do spiders want their webs to last for thousands of years?
I believe so. It's always like a, unfortunately, you start to see in cities more and more abandoned webs.
Oh, really?
Yeah, because it's also, it start to be a kind of a bioindicator of the pollution that is in the air, because many spiders like to eat the web, are proteins. I mean, when a spider weave a web in a corner, if there is enough food, enough flies, and not circulation of air, let's say, the spider will stay there and will maintain the web. If there is a hole here, a hole there, will repair it, but it will stay in the same position for a long time. Now, if a lot of particulate matter, pollution, it is what is emitted through carbon, fossil fuel emission, deposit on the web, then when the spider want to eat the web or repair it, it tastes very bad. It's when it let the web goes and then move to another place. I mean, he's, yeah, that was, but technically, and there are some spiders which are social. There are approximately 50,000 species of spider, and there are only 20 which are social spider. Social spider weave one single web all together. Wow. And they're much better off. They can catch big birds and big prey. I take care of your offspring as you take care of our baby lynx. I mean, it's an amazing social community. Up to 10,000 in one single web, gigantic. And they live almost in warmer region, in equatorial, it's kind of it's social spiders.
So we have a lot to learn, like E.O. Wilson tells us, from other social species. Yeah.
He was amazing.
Another question.
You went into low power mode.
Oh,
So you're
Karen, are you trying to ask a question?
Gotcha.
We only have, we're really quite towards the end of our time, but I can ask maybe one more kind of a fun question from Michelle. Have you both thought of a collaboration, a web of connection with your sculptures?
Oh, well, we could think of that, Thomas. That's a nice thought. The thing is,
let's ask Bolo, the spider diviner in Cameroon. Spiders believe it.
Yeah, I'm very happy with that. Let the Cameroon spider decide whether or not it's a good idea.
I would be an honor. I tremendously admire Antony, and I think it's urgent, necessary that we collaborate more. You know what I mean? There is nothing better, but even lose all our comfort zone, artists, collectors, sculpture, I think so. We really need to assemble and lose ourselves a little bit to go as fast as the world is asking, and to respect other ways of being and learn from other collaboration which have lasted for so long on this planet. I'm fully embrace the idea, and I would say yes, absolutely.
No, it's a crazy thing. Like, here we all are. You're all artists, and in a way, the kind of, well, what Thomas was saying earlier, that the ego thing kind of makes us kind of all in competitors, when in a way, we should all be, kind of helping each other with our webs. I really do believe that. I don't understand this kind of, we've accepted this idea of curators and all of the legitimizers, when in fact we should be just legitimizing each other. Well, we don't need to be legitimized in the first place. I mean, we are all trying to make sense, literally, like think through making. art was always made to be shared. It wasn't intended to be like treated as some kind of product that has to be kind of specialized and isolated. It was always there as part of the way that we connected with each other. That is what art is. It's a form of connection. And anyway, I really do hope that, yeah, I would love to work with Tomás. I would love to see what all of you people are working on. But I think, you know, the most extraordinary thing for me is, you know, that actually, you know, I think certainly through this last 2 years of lockdown, people who didn't think of themselves as artists have begun to realize how making things is just one of the most joyful parts of life, and that it helps embed us in the present moment, and it helps kind of make us just feel rooted. And you know, I think there's been a lot of I think ability to dwell that was given to us by COVID. I know it's been very tough for some, but suddenly, like time to be and to share being, you know, looking at a tree that you ignored because you were always going, you know, on holiday somewhere else, the tree that lived outside your window, that lived down the road. And I just, yeah, the artist that lived next door that you never spoke to because you were always too busy, you know, that kind of thing is I just hope we don't lose all of the things that COVID gave us. Some of them were negative, but I think a lot of positive came out of the last 2.5 years.